started, shall we? G'day everyone. My name's Shane Morris. I used to be a user experience evangelist at Microsoft, but I got better, and now I'm a user experience architect, working for myself at a company called Automatic Studio. And we do user interface design, user experience stuff. We do training and mentoring of particularly development companies in building their skills in user experience design and usability and all that good stuff. Today I'm going to spend the next hour or so talking to you about SketchFlow and Blend. SketchFlow, let's just do the whole show of hands thing first, I guess, so that I just get a sense. Who's using SketchFlow today? Yeah, smattering of people. Who's using Blend today? A few more people, and the rest is none of the above. Okay. Just a quick recap of Expression Studio and where SketchFlow fits in. So Expression Studio, we're up to version 4, and 4 products in Expression: Blend, Web Design, and Encoder. Going from the bottom up, Expression Encoder is for preparing your video and your audio assets for publishing, mostly for the web. So it does all your smooth streaming and your encoding and all that sort of stuff. Expression Design is a vector-based design tool, good for producing both XAML assets that you're going to use in your Silverlight and your WPF and your Windows Phone and your Surface applications, but also produces bitmap assets and combinations of the two. So it's a nice Expression Design's sort of killer feature is that you can lay out an entire website, slice it up and say this bit's going to be Silverlight XAML, this bit's going to be conventional HTML, and then export HTML slices and XAML slices and to work on separately. Expression Web is a web design and front-end development tool for standards-based web. And Expression Blend is, I guess, the headline act of Expression Studio. It's the user interface design and production tool for building all those XAML-based user interfaces. So as I said, for Surface, Windows Phone, for Silverlight and WPF. Inside Expression Blend is a feature that's been around for about a year now called SketchFlow. I was lucky enough to do some work, only a small amount of work, but some work at least on the SketchFlow product when I was at Microsoft. And SketchFlow really, the intention is to provide sort of more high-level design tools around conceptual design, around rapid prototyping, giving you some tools that you can use for early usability testing. It's built on top of Expression Blend, and in that respect it's quite interesting as a prototyping tool. Most of the prototyping tools that you see around these days, and there's been a bit of a rush of prototyping tools on the market in the last couple of years, are sort of standalone. Some of them will generate HTML, but even the HTML that they generate is not particularly usable in production. There's only a couple of prototyping tools that sort of sit on top of the production platform itself, one being SketchFlow and the other obvious one being Adobe Catalyst. Who's using other prototyping tools apart from SketchFlow? Anyone? Maybe Balsamiq or Axure, or Axure, or I always get Axure and Azure mixed up. iRise. There's a lot of them out there at the moment. SketchFlow is kind of unique in that it goes very deep, and that's both its strength and its weakness. I've been working at Cochlear up in Sydney for the last 6 or so months. Cochlear makes those bionic ear implants, you know, that go inside your brain and restore your hearing. Pretty amazing stuff. And I've been really lucky to be working there on a bunch of different projects over the last little while. We've been doing some conventional WPF desktop apps. We've been doing some touch-based apps. We've even been doing some device work. And we use SketchFlow, not exclusively, we use SketchFlow and other prototyping techniques inside Cochlear to get our designs out early. We use SketchFlow for stakeholder management, so most of the projects at Cochlear are agile. So at the end of every sprint, the UX team, which is 3 of us, for the main project I'm working on, we produce a updated SketchFlow prototype of the state of the product, and that gets published to the intranet at the end of every sprint, and all our stakeholders around the world can access the SketchFlow prototype whenever they want, send us feedback, and we get that constant review cycle. So SketchFlow has been really good for us to create these early prototypes, these quick conceptual designs. They're not production quality, they're certainly not release quality, but they allow us to rapidly iterate our ideas, rapidly get feedback back from stakeholders as well as users. And so SketchFlow has been a really handy tool for us at Cochlear, particularly because some of the products we're making are really complex. One of the products we're making is provides new ways of tuning these implants for audiologists to more efficiently tune people with implants. And so some very complex software going on. And so a traditional sort of, storyboard type prototype, which just had a bunch of static screens, isn't really going to cut it at Cochlear. Our prototype actually generates sound so that we can put, sample users can put on headsets and listen to the sound generated by various different tuning activities. So it's a really complex prototype. And a deep and extensible product like SketchFlow has been important for us for that reason. And I'll just say it up front now, the strength of SketchFlow, that it's built on top of the production environment, that you can go deep, that you can add your own code, you can connect your own data sources, is also its weakness in the sense that compared to a lot of other prototyping tools, the learning curve is quite steep. And most designers, when they first approach SketchFlow, get a little bit of a fright when they paint their first button and then open the properties panel and find out that a button has 237 properties, or however many it is. SketchFlow tries to shield you from some of that complexity, but nevertheless all that complexity is there under the hood, and it's something that you usually have to manage. So that's just a little bit of background of how I've been using it. In the question and answer section, I'm happy to sort of answer some more questions about how we've been using it at Cochlear and at some other places. For those of you who's never seen SketchFlow in action before? Okay, so I wasn't sure whether I needed to do this quick demo or not, but it sounds like I should. So let's just bring up a SketchFlow project. This is a SketchFlow project in Blend. So we're running Expression Blend 4. This is a Silverlight project that I'm running here. Key feature of any SketchFlow project is this flow chart, right? So this is where I first start to lay out the flow of my application. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. But basically each of those boxes, apart from the green one, are screens in my little demo here with arrows showing the flow through them. The green guy is what we call a component screen. So that's a reusable element that's being used on more than one screen. Component screens are really handy for things like nav bars and login dialogues and sorts of things that you might see appear on multiple places. We create them once and then reuse them. So I'll show you how I've built this prototype in a sec, but I'm just going to run it up for now. So hit F5 just like you would in Blend or Visual Studio. The thing starts to build. It'll launch a browser because it's a Silverlight project. First it's got to spin up a server. I probably should have done that first just to save a bit of time. Any second now. And here it is. It's looking good on my screen. Connecting up to our server, loading our Silverlight project. So here's a SketchFlow prototype in run mode. Okay, so we're not building it now; we're actually running the prototype. And there's a couple of things that you'll see. So the main screen is here in the middle. Over here is the player bar, and this allows us to control the prototype without necessarily clicking on it. So what I normally do when I'm building my first pass prototypes, they're more like storyboards. I populate a bunch of screens. I use the SketchFlow map to create links between those screens, and I don't do much else. Right? They're all just basically static screenshots. In fact, chances are they're actually scans of hand-drawn sketches that I've done. So the navigation bar over here on the left allows us to navigate through the prototype. So I've just navigated from one screen to the other. So now I'm at the screen called Layer on Blend. If we flip back to Blend itself, you can see that's that guy there. So you can see that arrow from Home to Layer on Blend. That's what's giving me that navigation. If I don't want to follow the arrows, I can bring up the actual map here in place, and I can navigate through the prototype that way to different screens. Down the bottom is where users can provide feedback from a prototype. We'll see that in a sec. So as I was saying before, SketchFlow is a layer on top of Blend itself, fits on top of there. We use it for prototyping and conceptual design, and also it's a really useful on-ramp to Blend for designers who are trying to learn Blend. So what I just did there is I ran a little storyboard, and so one of the ways that we animate these prototypes is we build conventional XAML storyboards, and we can launch them from our prototype. So that was what happened then. Kind of made all this point already, except I've put some feedback on there, which I probably should get rid of. So made this point before. When I say conceptual design and rapid prototyping, at conceptual design level, what we're most interested in is the overall experience that we're trying to create. And we're certainly not worried about graphics, fonts, logos, and colors. So you'll notice that SketchFlow prototypes are sketchy by default. They don't have to be, but when you create elements in your SketchFlow prototype by default, they take on board this sketchy look. Let's have a look at some of that. So here's my little reusable element. I just made myself a little nav bar. And you can see that this nav bar has a bunch of different what we call visual states here, so that I could flip between. Oops, there we go. So these are the different states of the buttons on and off. So normally we don't need to worry about that. Let me just refresh this page. I'm just going to use it for navigation. So as I said, we get a bunch of sketchy styled elements out of the box that help us make our prototype. Sketchy sliders, sketchy radio buttons, sketchy buttons. The really cool thing about these guys, if I flip back to Blend and I go to that same screen, my sketchy style screen, and then hide that. So here's that same button now in the designer. If we have a look at its properties, all the way down the bottom, it has a style set. So what it's done is it's set the sketchy style. If I reset the style, it'll become a plain old conventional button. This is really important, right? So even though these guys have sketchy style and they don't have a finished look, they've got all the behaviors and all the attributes and all the methods and properties of a real button. So once again, that's the strength and weakness of this thing. At first, you don't want all that stuff, and you can see all those properties down the right there. Later on, they become really useful. And we'll talk a little bit more about styles in a sec. So a bunch of sketchy style elements. I guess the key feature is that someone like me, and I'm a designer, I'm not really great with code, and when I do code, it goes if then else, if then else, if then else, if then else. That's called designer code. Lets me do a whole bunch of stuff without writing any code. So for example, I can take an element like that sketchy style button, right click on it and say navigate to, and say where that element will navigate to in my prototype. So without any code, I can wire all these guys up. I can also create these animations, these little storyboards. We won't have time today to show you how to make these storyboards, but they're the exact same storyboards that you would make in Blend. And once I've created a storyboard, I can use Blend to actually trigger and control those storyboards, SketchFlow I should say. And then relatively new to Blend, we haven't had them for so long, is these behaviors. And these are really cool because these allow me to do a whole bunch of more complex interactivity, once again without writing code. What I do is I drop these behaviors onto elements in SketchFlow, and I can make them, for example, control a storyboard, change properties of elements on the page, navigate around, flip between visual states. Visual states are really useful. They allow me to sort of just define different different states of the same screen, and then I can use SketchFlow to flip between them. I can even get SketchFlow to animate between them if I want the layout to be fluid. So codeless navigation, and I guess one of the killer features is this feedback feature, which allows me to publish my prototype and get feedback from end users or stakeholders that I can integrate back into Blend. So I'm running the prototype as a user now, so if I wanted to give some feedback about this screen, I can pull out my pen, say, we'll choose red, and maybe I have some feedback about this screen. If I'm a stakeholder, what's the most likely feedback I would have about this screen? What's the traditional stakeholder feedback? Typo, is there? Yeah, there is too. No, that wasn't what I was thinking. Make the logo bigger. It's traditional, right? Make the logo bigger. So I can go right through the prototype, and I can highlight stuff, scribble straight on it. I can make text notes here. And when I'm finished, I can export that feedback to a file. Chain. And we'll just stick it on the desktop. And we'll call it tens. Save it there. Having stuck it on the desktop, what I can do back in Blend, I've got a feedback window. Hello. Am I losing my mind? Can anyone see there he is. Demo brain. What I can do is I can load that feedback file back in off the desktop. This one. And if I have a look at the map again, you'll see a little light bulb there. That shows me which screens have got feedback on it. And I can actually navigate through the actual prototype in Blend. And with feedback turned on, I can see, let me just get you full size there, Control 0. I can see the feedback in place, overlaid on top of my prototype. So what we do at Cochlear is every Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock, we have a UX review, rain, hail or shine, no matter how much progress or how little progress we've made. Stakeholders can come to that. We give them the current state of the user experience. We gather feedback, and literally I run the prototype in those sessions. We scribble directly on the screens. We export that feedback at the end of the Thursday review, and that basically becomes our to-do list for the rest of the week as we work through those annotations. Added feature in Blend 4, if you're running TFS, you can actually turn these annotations into work items in TFS, which is kind of cool as well. So that was feedback, and I guess the other point is that, as I said, because it's built on top of the production environment, it's a really Visual Studio project. So that's the project structure as shown in Blend. I can open this exact same project in Visual Studio if I'm crazy enough. Edit in Visual Studio. And this is, of course, the way that I collaborate with my developer buddies in production. In prototyping mode, it's the way my developer buddies can expose a view model, for example, or provide for me other services, or can write me some little classes that generate beeps, for example, at the pitches I need for the prototype. So that's the Cook's tour of SketchFlow in action. So that's the SketchFlow player, and you also had a quick look at me building a SketchFlow prototype inside Blend. Let's go back to the PowerPoint and cover some more of the features. I won't spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to sort of emphasize the importance of sketching. I think as we start to envision the experiences that we want to create, it's really important for us to be able to work in an agile fashion, in the sense of being able to generate lots of ideas without too much emotional effort, to try those ideas out on real users or stakeholders, gather that feedback and iterate and refine our ideas without being encumbered by a whole bunch of code, which really quickly starts to slow us down and starts to influence our choices, sometimes even subconsciously. When we start to think about design options, sometimes we find ourselves thinking about choosing the design options that we know how to code rather than what might necessarily be the best option at the time. So, the whole idea of sketching, and Bill Buxton up at Microsoft Research talks a lot about this, is about generating lots of ideas and being not too emotionally attached to those ideas, because it's by exploring the wider space that you find that great solution. And oftentimes, for engineers and software developers, that's probably the most frustrating thing about design. It's harder when you're doing any sort of design to just infer the correct solution from the problem. Instead, design, no matter what sort of design you're doing, tends to be sort of exploratory and iterative, which is really annoying if you're an engineer, and was why engineers love tools like SketchFlow that allow us designers to go away and play on our own, do all that iteration without having to bother our developer buddies to get stuff changed. Here's a little bit of an extract from Bill Buxton's book. I've probably made all these points, but probably the other key thing to say about sketching, and Bill Buxton refers to this phrase, distinct gesture, is he says that we should keep the fidelity of our design, of our drawings and screen mock-ups, should match the fidelity of our thinking. And so what we don't want to do when we launch into drawing our first page is start thinking colours, fonts and logos in exact placement. We should be happy to just sketch clouds and boxes and rough elements and work things out like that. A little bit about flow. One of the things I really like about SketchFlow is how it really is designed all around that flow graph, that map. Because when you think about user experiences, where they go wrong mostly is not actually on any one individual screen or page, but on the joins between those pages, on the journey between them. That's where our user experience can go most wrong, and that's where it's most expensive to fix. So the advantage of SketchFlow, and even before SketchFlow, I would emphasize the importance of understanding what we call the workflow of your product or your service, long before you worry about the individual selection of widgets and text boxes on any one page. And SketchFlow allows us, supports that process of understanding the overall journey first before we worry about what's in individual screens. So here's that same map that we were just looking at before. Oftentimes, when I'm using SketchFlow in this mode, I'm just drawing boxes, and I'm not even thinking about, is this a screen? I'm just describing steps. Because sometimes it's when you put all those boxes and you draw the arrows between them, trying to show the main route through your application. It's when you've drawn that map and then you take a step back that you start to see the interaction model starts to reveal itself to you, right? So if you see a little tight iterative loop of 3 steps that happen again and again and again, that says something to you about what your navigation model might be. If you see something that's very linear, well, maybe that's saying wizard to you. So it's a really good idea to do these workflow diagrams or SketchFlow maps, whatever it is, and understand that journey so that you can start to shape the user experience around it. So how are we going for time? We've got about half an hour left, so we've got plenty of time. So what we might do is, I'm just going to flip around therefore and talk a little bit about Windows Phone and the bad news about Windows Phone. The bad news is that SketchFlow specifically you can't mock up Windows Phone apps specifically in SketchFlow. What you'll do, and what we might have a little play with doing this in a sec, is you'll need to basically fake it. So to summarise that a little bit more succinctly, you can't run SketchFlow prototypes in the phone emulator. So what you'll do instead is, as you'll fake it, as I say, Blend 4 SP1 will integrate the phone support into the production environment, but not into SketchFlow. Okay, does that make sense? I was kind of being a bit vague there. So having said that, let's maybe have a little bit of a play with SketchFlow. We'll just see how we'll go. We'll sort of play with this for sort of like maybe 15 minutes. See how we go. Building a little SketchFlow phone demo. What we do at Cochlear when we're building our device UIs is that we build our SketchFlow prototype and then we run it on a little touch tablet, which I'm just starting up here, waiting for it to start. Bear with me, sorry. There we go. One more thing to do. So let me just put it across. This is a prototype for a SketchFlow prototype for an application that I'm working with a colleague of mine, Matt Morph. It's just a little fun sort of ego thing for us, and so we run it on the touch tablet here. Who's got an iPad? Yeah? Check this out. My iPad has USB ports. So this is our little touchy prototype, and so I can't show you some of the ones we've made at Cockley, but you can get the idea of how it might work. So what we do is we give users this thing in place of an actual device while we're still at prototyping phase, and it allows us to muck around and test some various interaction styles before we even have a device. So you could do a similar thing if you're doing phone stuff. You could run your little prototype on something like this. Cool. We'll see how we go. We probably won't have time to put our phone prototype on here. Oh, actually, while I'm there, you'll notice something I did there. I'm just going to go back. I hid the player UI. So what I do in testing is I either collapse the UI like I did there, or I hide it altogether. So if I'm running a usability test, when I've got to the point where the prototype is at a stage where it's pretty much can all be driven from the screen itself, then I hide that navigation panel altogether. Or, just as likely, I drag that navigation panel off, and I take my word for it. I drag the navigation panel off and I put it on a second screen so that if my user gets a little lost or does something that I didn't expect, or if I just need to take them to another part of the application, I can actually drive the application from the player control, take my test subject to another page and recommence the testing from there. So that's a really handy feature. And you can either collapse it at runtime, or back in Blend you can actually specify whether you want that player UI to show or not. Okay. So let's have a little bit of a play with Blend, shall we? Let's build a SketchFlow project from scratch. Hello, computer. So I've just started up Blend over here, and it won't let me change screen until I tell it that I'm creating a new project. So you just have to take my word that I'm doing that. And then I'll bring it over to you guys any second now. So I've just started a brand new project in Blend. Let's get rid of that. Here's my starting screen, and here's my SketchFlow map. So I totally made up this example about half an hour ago, so we'll be making it up a little bit as we go along. I decided I was going to make that thing I just showed you on the touch, and I figured you don't care about that. So in a transparent attempt to provide some local color, let's make an Auckland restaurant guide for Windows Phone. So I think that there's going to be 3 steps. There's going to be some sort of home page that's going to have about the application and maybe some different ways to navigate. There's going to be a page for browsing through like restaurants. I'm going to do like cards. In Melbourne we have these, do you have them here, that you could buy these little decks of cards that have sort of, they're called Melbourne Secrets, and they have sort of all sorts of, out of the way bars and cafes and stuff. So maybe we're going to do something like that. So I'm going to have a deck of little cards. And maybe there's going to be a favourites screen. Maybe there's some way to provide reviews for any individual one here. So reviews. I'm just brainstorming. What else do I need? That'll probably do. I can colour these guys if I want. I can also change where is it? If I just click on the actual arrow, I can also change the transition style. So if I can do some sort of basic stuff. To be honest, the only two options I ever use is fade or this push one that will push one out of the way and push another one on, which is a kind of way to a nice easy way to fake some some sort of touch-based stuff. They're pretty much the only two I use. We're making it for phones, so let's just pick a decent screen size. So back on the home screen, we'll I must have hidden my objects. There we go. Back on the home screen, we'll make this user control. There we go. Yeah, that gives us enough room for a phone. So Windows Phone is 800 by 480, right? So this gives us a little. Actually, we'll make it 600. Gives us a little bit of room to move. And then what I'll do is back on the SketchFlow map, I'll take this guy and I'll tell him that that's the default navigation screen size from now on. So from now on, we'll be making screens of that size. In fact, I'm going to delete all these and make them again for that reason. Yeah. Delete key doesn't work. I knew that. It always takes a while to delete stuff. I'm not sure why. Let's just start with the cards. We'll put the favourites in as well while we're at it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, because it's on the phone, what I want to do is I'm just going to put a phone background on every screen. So we'll go to the home screen and we'll Control 0. We'll stick a picture of the phone on, which I happen to have handy. Ticket. So I've just got a screenshot of the phone there. So we'll just drag him on. That way. This guy will just resize to fill, auto size fill. Is he out of proportion? Uniform. There we go. It's hard to tell because I've got a widescreen. I kind of get a bit confused here. We'll just make the background black. Cool. So we've made a little phone, and I'll just quickly wire up the back button. That'll be enough for now. So over in our assets panel, because we're working in SketchFlow, we've got a bunch of sketch-specific styles and assets. So normally I choose all my styles from here, but even if I choose my controls from the panel on the left here, they come out sketchy. So here's a button. I'm just going to stick a button over the top of back there, and what we'll do is we'll tell this button that he navigates to back. So you can see the other options here. Here are the other screens that SketchFlow thinks I might want to navigate to here based on what I put in the map. I just want to go back whenever that button gets used, and we'll make him invisible, and you'll never know he was there. So basically, I've got this phone image and this back button, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick that on every page so it's a consistent element. So I've selected both those two, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a component screen. So that's those green guys that we saw before, those reusable elements that I can use in multiple places. So we'll say make into component screen, we'll call it phone. And it builds, so it creates for me separately my little XAML file for my phone. If we have a look at the map again, you'll see, let me just resize this to something reasonable. You'll see that it's created this phone element, and we can add that phone element to all the screens we want. So now he's on home, cards, and favorites. We'll put him away. We'll go to favorites. Little exclamation mark is telling me to rebuild. So we'll let that happen. So now instead of those two individual elements, I've just got a thing called phone, and I'm just going to lock him so that I don't accidentally drag him around while I'm working on the UI itself. So it's supposed to be sketchy, yeah. So we're not going to worry about making things look nice. Let's just stick on this page a rectangle for the background of the screen. I'm going to make the background white, not because I think that the final background is going to be white, but I just want to emphasize the fact that this is a prototype. It's not about look and feel, and we'll make this exactly 800 by 480. Put him in there, kind of thing. So that rectangle will be our background, and we can stick some elements onto there. We get a few sort of pre-made text elements. So let's make a title, Auckland Restaurant Guide. It should probably be a bit bigger. And we'll stick a couple of buttons on. 1, 2. Just moving fast here. We'll call this guy Favorites. And we'll call this guy Nearby. That's what I was going to do, yeah. So it's going to use the GPS apparently to work out what restaurants are nearby. So let's navigate him to cards. Let's navigate him to I want to navigate him to favourites. So, has anyone worked out what I've been doing wrong this whole time? You bastards. You've all been sitting there, watch this, he's going to totally, when's he going to realise, right? Great, guys. It's nice to know we're all in this together. Cut that out of there, go to the home screen, and stick it into there. Home screen needs to be black. All right, where was I? Favourites. Navigates to Favourites. Nearby. Navigates to Cards. Cool. And often what I'll do at this point is, you know, particularly for a screen like this where the contents is probably mainly going to be branding, and I don't really care about that right now. I'm just going to add a note, and I'm going to say stuff like logo, news, what's hot, I don't know, making stuff up. So these little notes are just pre-made for us to make those sorts of things. The other thing that you can do, which is not a SketchFlow feature, this is a blend feature, but you can add a annotation, create an annotation. So I can make little notes to myself. Speak to marketing about the branding. So these little guys can just be notes to myself, or I can choose to make those annotations also available in the running prototype. It's just up to me. And those annotations will also get included in the exported documentation. So when you do export to Word, all those annotations come along as well. So let's just check. We've got our favourite screen, which has got nothing on it, and we've got our cards screen. So let me just, at this point, just so that I'm going to run it up in a sec. So let's just quickly, I'll just draw on here. You're the cards screen. Fill, no fill. And you are the favourite screen, just so that we don't lose track of them. Of course, we are going to lose track of them if I do them in black. Cards, path, stroke, white. All right, let's run our little app. So press F5, see how I'm going so far. Connects to our prototype. So here's our front screen. I could navigate using the navigation panel, but I don't need that. Instead, we'll just go through to here's favorites, here's back, here's nearby, or cards, and here's back. So our prototype's starting to come together, and here's how I can show the annotations if I want to. Hide those. I can also show and hide feedback. I should have mentioned that with feedback, you can load multiple feedback files simultaneously. So if you have feedback from multiple users, you can see them all on top of each other in Blend. All right. We'll we don't have time to go too much further with this prototype. What I might just quickly do is show you the sample data feature, which is kind of cool. So this is not SketchFlow specific sample data, but it's a really handy feature when you're prototyping. So what I want to do is on this page, I just want to show like cards of different restaurants that you can flick through. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some sample data over here in the data panel. So new sample data source will work for me. So I've got two options here. I could have made my sample data in XML, so with some real restaurant names and photos and stuff. But for now, I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to let Blend generate for me some dummy data. So I can make a collection of restaurants with a bunch of properties. The first property will probably be the restaurant name. Second property will probably be the description. And currently, that's a Boolean, so I'll change that to a string of about 20 words, say, 25, since that's where it ended up. We'll have a photo. And I could point it at Acacia Photos. I'm not even going to do that. It'll just create its own. And last, we'll say whether you're allowed to bring your own alcohol. Back home, we call that BYO. What do you call it here? Sorry? Same, BYO? Awesome. So that's a Boolean, right? Just for fun, to show off one of the features, we'll add an address. You can also add a phone number and a URL, all sorts of stuff. But under string here, we've got a bunch of different types. Addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, URLs. So once again, when you're populating your prototype with dummy data, this is really handy. So I'll choose address, and that'll populate my sample data with a bunch of addresses. If I want to, I can actually then go and see the generated data and edit it myself if I want. Photo is an address. I've screwed that up. Okay. Let me just fix that. Photo should be a image. Address should be a string of type address. All right, let's try that again. That's better. So they're chairs. Get over it. These addresses are in American format. You can change that. This is kind of an undocumented feature, but deep in your Blend installation, there's a bunch of XML files that just basically have all this sample data in it. So you can change it to your own. Addresses aren't so bad, but phone numbers are American phone numbers are sort of throw people off. So I generally want to change those. I can just edit straight here, but if I wanted to reuse those changes, I'd make them back in the XML. So there's all our sample data, and what I want to do is show one of those at a time, but I'm going to be a little bit cheeky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that whole collection of addresses of restaurants, and I'll just grab that guy, and we'll drag him onto here. And it makes a little list box for me of all the elements. I don't actually want to show the list. What I just want to show is individual cards. Well, I'm kind of cheating here. I'm going to hide this list box in a sec, and I'm just going to show the selected item from the list box, and we're just going to iterate through the selected item as they move through the cards. So what I'll do instead is we'll stick a grid over here on the main screen. I won't worry about the size right now since we're running out of time, but I will make him white, just so that we can tell the difference. And what I'll do is I'll say that I want to grab the actual individual items from the collection, and let's flip over to details mode here. So we were in list mode. We'll flip over to details mode, and that way when I drag this guy on here, we're going to create a little visualization of the current selection. It comes complete with headings, which I don't actually want. So we'll just get rid of those. A little bit hard mousing on an angle like this. So these guys are all our elements in our visualization. What I'm just going to do, just quickly to sort them out, is I'm going to put them into a stack panel. Makes it easier for me to rearrange them. So this guy's the address. I'm going to move him down well actually, where's the name? This guy, we'll move him to the top of the stack panel, followed by the address, followed by the image, BYO at the bottom, say, and we just need to make this whole thing a lot bigger so that we can all see it, myself included. So I'll just auto size it the width so that it goes full width. Take my heading, we'll make him bigger. Nice and big. And these guys can be a little bit bigger. This guy needs to wrap. So under the advanced properties, remember I was saying there's more properties than you know what to do with? And here's my little checkbox which needs a heading, right? So we'll just put him in a stack panel as well. We'll make this stack panel horizontal, left align him, and we'll just add in there, add into that stack panel a little bit of text, BYO, BY. Oops, hang on. F2, BYO. Okay, not sure what I did wrong there. One more time. Does not. Oh, thank you guys. How did that happen? No, it isn't. It was a good get though. All right, I'm not going to make you hang around while I work that out. Oh, there we go. Text box, width, auto. Checkbox. Not sure. All right, I'm not going to make you wait. So let's just run that one up, and then we might not get too much further than that. So we'll compile this guy up. He's doing it, isn't he? There we go, sorry. Flip through to nearby. Not awesome to start. When we select one, we can move through them. So what's wrong? Well, we didn't have one selected to start when we first arrived at the screen. Easy fixed. When this is where we'll use some behaviours. So in my list of behaviours, one of my favourites is called change property. What I'll do is I'll drop that on my list box, and I'll say, hey, you list box, when you are loaded, set your selected index, selected index to 0. So this time when I run it, that page will automatically flip through to 0. So you can see how I can use behaviours to do codey things without having to write code. It's very designer safe. Much better. What I want to do next, and then we'll wrap up, is just automate that flipping between pages. So I'll stick into this grid. I'll stick another button. Actually, even better than a button. There's what would you call it? It's not really a plug-in, but there's an add-in up on CodePlex called Mockups, called Expression Mockups, which gives you a whole bunch of other really useful elements, shapes and mock-up media players, a whole bunch of stuff that's really useful for when you're doing mock-ups. And I'm going to go for button with icon. I'm going to stick that guy there. Because these guys come with some pre-made icons, which is really handy. We'll just get rid of the text altogether. And we'll make the icon an arrow. So it's got all these pre-made icons for me, very handy. And what we'll do is we'll do another change property behavior on this button. So back to behaviours, change property, I'll stick it on the button. And what we'll say is when you are clicked, what we want you to do is go to list box, so the target object is the list box, and I want you to increment the selected item. Thank you, selected index. And now you guys are on board. Index by 1. So you see what happened? Every time I press that, it's going to do it. Now with more time, we'd do a nice little flippy animation at the same time. We'd write a storyboard and we'd launch that storyboard at the same time. No time for that. Let's just hide the list box. I'll just put it down to 0. And that might be as far as we get in terms of the demo. And then I'll just flip through a few more slides with a few tips. You might want to, some of the tips you might want to download and read for yourself. There's a few in there. So we go to nearby, and when I press this guy, it should go to the next restaurant, yeah? Woohoo! Now, of course, the coders in the room know what's going to happen if I do this 9 times, right? It's going to throw an exception there, error on page. The answer to that, we don't have time to fix it, but the answer to that is to add a condition to my change property action. So here under conditions, I'll say I only want this action to run if the value of the list box element property binding, where was my list box? List box selected item index is less than 9, since we had 10 of them. So you get the idea? And what I'd do is I'd make another one of those that said if it is 9, don't increment, loop around to 0, and so how I can get my little loop going. All right, you're going to have to take all of that as read, because we're going to flip back to the PowerPoint. 6 minutes to go, cool. So that was my little demo. Happy to take questions about anything you saw there or some more complex stuff. So we've seen some key features from Blend and from SketchFlow that are really useful for us for prototyping. We saw those behaviours. The other thing that we didn't see today is visual states, but when I was running my little prototype on the touchpad there, when the navigation menus were showing and hiding, and when the comments were showing and hiding, and when the examples were going up and down, they are all just different visual states. So I just record different visual states, and usually Blend knows how to animate between them and does all the flippy, changey sort of stuff for me. Really, really powerful visual states, so much so that I don't use storyboards nearly as often anymore, because most of the transitions I need to make are reasonably, simple transition from this state to that state. I can adjust the easing so that it accelerates and decelerates nicely, and that usually handles 95% of the animations that I need to do. And storyboards are only for the more complex things where I need to sequence things carefully. On this guy, for example, I'll just flip back to our guy on the touchpad. On this guy, when we pull up the examples, it's actually it's a 2-step animation. When you put it down, the panel collapses, and then it takes a little while for the examples to hide. So that's a 2-step animation. So I do a storyboard there to make that work. We talked about we saw sample data in action. We talked about the flow map. We saw Navigate 2. I can right-click and make any element, including elements I've drawn with the pen, navigable. And I can also make any element activate a visual state as well. So right-click on that, activate state. We talked about feedback. Didn't talk about publish to SharePoint. So this is a new feature in Blend 4. It's Silverlight only, but you can publish your prototype directly up to SharePoint, send people a link to the prototype on SharePoint, and then rather than having to save their feedback and email it back to you, they can actually save their feedback back up into the SharePoint site. So that's kind of a cool feature if you're running SharePoint in your organization. There's another feature called SketchFlow Animations, which is kind of like basically it's a storyboard. You can create basically a sequence of frames on a storyboard for any one page. And so that's how you would illustrate a more complex user interaction when you haven't quite got it ready to actually make it clickable by the user. You might instead play this storyboard that just, I often have I make a little mouse cursor and I show the mouse cursor moving around, and what will happen is the cursor moves around. SketchFlow animations are really useful when you've got some complex interactivity to show and you don't want to take the trouble to actually wire it up. I don't use SketchFlow animations so often though, because they have a fairly limited life. Once you're ready to actually wire things up, you've pretty much got to throw them out and start again. So they don't get as much use in my practice. Mentioned this already, SharePoint publishing. Other new feature for SketchFlow with Blend 4 is that when you export to Word, we also export the feedback. I shouldn't say we, it's not me anymore. I showed you conditional behaviors. Adding conditions to your behaviors allow me to be much more expressive in the user interface without having to resort to my coder buddies or to code myself. And that's not SketchFlow specific, that's a Blend feature, right? So those conditional behaviors are production quality. The other thing we didn't see today is the data store, and that allows me to store elements, particularly if in my case I use them to store global values that I want to keep between pages. So on that restaurant guide, for example, I might want to store the one that's currently being looked at, so I'd save that up into the data store as just as an index number so that I can reference it wherever I go through the prototype. A few other tips, which I won't get through all of them because I've only got 2 minutes left. You've probably got the idea here, but one of the beauties of Blend is that I can start with this sketchy style, and the beauty of the sketchy style is that I don't distract sketch holders or users with critiquing my visuals. We're just critiquing the usability of the application. I can then drop back to more of a wireframe style when I'm starting to think about the exact size and placement of elements, really important when you're designing for touch, before I drop back through to the actual finished version. And in another talk, we could talk about how visual designers and interaction designers can work together in Blend, and how my visual designer can be creating for me the graphical styles, which I can then drop into my project at the appropriate time. If you want to use implicit styles in SketchFlow, in Silverlight or WPF, you can actually automate some of that. We talked a little bit about component screen. You saw an example of component screen with my phone. The one thing I wanted to emphasize that when we started off at Cochlear, we were using component screens for every single reusable element. The problem with that is that you start to get a lot of, and I'll just fast forward in the slide because there's a picture of it, an awful lot of green guys, like spiders through your prototype. So we quickly learned to just use component screens for the things that actually navigate, like nav bars and control panels and stuff like that. And everything else we just use traditional user controls. There's not many disadvantages of user controls. The only thing is that you can't activate their states from Blend. You have to use a behavior. So Blend will let me, for a component screen, will let me right-click, activate state on the actual component screen. For a user control, I have to add a behavior, so it's just slightly more complicated. Next slide is about behaviors versus code. This one's a little bit radical, and Microsoft may not want me to say this, but those behaviors are awesome. When you've got a page with 13 or 14 behaviors on them and something goes wrong and you're trying to debug it, it can be a bit of a nightmare. Because, and maybe for coders, because you'll run it from Visual Studio and you'll dig in and you'll see exactly what's going on. But for me as a designer, all these behaviors that have been sprinkled through the visual tree in random places, all firing off at different times, extremely difficult for me to work out what's going wrong. So there are times when I resort back to code, I'll be honest. Because for me as a designer, once things started getting complicated, I can see the code executing and I can work out what's going on when I want things to happen in a certain sequence. So behaviors are great to get you started without code, but over time you might want to actually use code in specific places, and that's cool, and that's one of the features obviously of SketchFlow. I mentioned the mock-up library, expressionblend.codeplex.com is where you can get all those extra elements. We've already covered our phone, so I pretty much made it to the end, 1 minute over. A few different resources that you can check out to learn more about SketchFlow. Christian Schurman is the main program manager. He's got a blog where he announces and does a whole bunch of walkthroughs of all the new features. I've written a series of 3 articles on SitePoint about how to prototype how to prototype with SketchFlow and use Blend itself. Sketch Mockups Library again, and a book by my ex-colleagues Chris Bernard and Sarah Summers, specifically about using SketchFlow. It's called dynamicprototyping.com. So I'll leave it with that, and as is tradition apparently here, we'll take questions over at the recharge bar immediately after this session. Thanks for your time, guys. Oh, if you want more, I'm doing a session called Pimp My App, which is kind of like design for developers, this afternoon at 4:15.